Welcome to Biblically Lit, conversations that illuminate Scripture and ignite faith. I'm your host, MindiJoFurby, author and founder of Kingswind Books. Happy New Year, friends! I'm honestly having a hard time believing that we've begun another new year so quickly. Like, they are going by so fast, and they just seem to keep going faster and faster and faster. Anyone else really feel like that? Because it's like, I was going to say the world is spinning. It's obviously spinning, but it just seems to be going faster and faster every year. And does anybody else have a hard time writing the new year correctly for the first several months into a new year? I will definitely be writing 2023 instead of 2024 for a minute. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. Maybe I can get that under control faster this year. Who knows? Anywho, last week I talked about how I'm not really into New Year's resolutions. I don't think they're bad or anything. I've just never been a fan of them personally. And again, I've never really felt motivated to make one. So I really don't think I would be very motivated to keep one, even if I did make one. But I do think that having goals and ambitions is a wise thing. It is good to plan for the future and not just exist and be lazy and kind of just let life happen however it will. It is good to make a plan. It is good to work toward something or lots of somethings. In fact, Proverbs 6:6-11 says, quote, "Go to the ant, O sluggard, observe her ways and be wise, which, having no chief, officer, or ruler, prepares her food in the summer and gathers her provision in the harvest. How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Your poverty will come in like a vagabond, and your need like an armed man," unquote. In other words, we should think about the future and work hard to make sure that we are prepared for it. The ant does this automatically. God has created them and designed them to just know what to do. And we, at least we should be, far more intelligent than ants. But in order to prepare for the future, we, 1, have to know it's coming, 2, know what to do to be ready for it, and then 3, work hard to make it happen. The Bible talks a lot about the future, but it doesn't actually talk a lot about setting specific goals, at least in the way that we think about them. Rather, it speaks of prioritizing our ultimate future, our ultimate spiritual reality with Christ in heaven. And for the here and now, we are instructed to make plans, work hard, but to trust God with the results. Proverbs 16:9 says, quote, quote, "The mind of man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps," unquote. We can make all the plans in the world that we want, but if they're not what God wants, we are planning them in vain. And that's why we should always live with what I like to call an open hand perspective. We can plan and we can work hard towards something, but we need to keep our hands, hearts, and heads open to change if God wants something else to happen. So I always kind of vision it like holding your hands up, just like you're raising your hands to the sky with open palms, saying, okay, this is what I want to do. This is where I think you may be leading. But if at any point you want to come along and change direction or do something else, it's your will first. I can make plans, especially we're also talking about we're not talking about moral issues. Like, is this the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? Like, if you're thinking, oh, should I go out and start stealing something? Okay, obviously that's a no. God has already revealed that in Scripture. Like, that is a no. So we're not talking about moral issues. We're talking about just forks in the road. Do we go this way? Do we go that way? That one is not necessarily or ever more moral than the other one. It's just a different path. And so this is what I'm talking about when we're making goals and ambitions and resolutions. It's the same kind of thing. We are looking toward a fork and we're saying, well, God, I don't really know which way you want me to go. I'm not really sensing any clear kind of oomph to go in a specific direction from your spirit. So I'm going to go this way, but if at any point you want me to turn around and go the other way, let me know. So this is what we are supposed to be living like. And we do what Proverbs says in that chapter 16 passage. We plan the way, we choose to go one direction, but we leave God to direct the steps. Sometimes he does lead where we thought that we wanted to go, but other times he leads us in the exact opposite direction. And the kicker is we have to be okay with both. We have to be okay with him leading us where we thought that he was leading us and we thought we wanted to go, but we also have to be okay with if he changes course. And that is what I want to talk about today. I am going to share part of my story, a time in my life where I made plans and God did not direct my steps or his steps in the way I wanted him to. I had a goal and I was determined to see it through, but it did not work out the way that I thought it would, and it hurt. It was the absolute lowest point in my life, and it took years for God to pull me out of it. My purpose in sharing this with you isn't to bum you out, especially as we start a brand new year. Rather, my goal is to remind us all that we should make plans loosely and never to the point that we're leaving God out of them. He is the author of our lives. He is the one writing the story, and we need to let him do it. So here is a bit of his story in and through my life. The story begins and ends actually with a love story. I was in college and I started dating a guy whose plan was to go into full-time ministry when he was finished with his service in the military. So he had, I think it was a 4-year stint, and he was, I think, 2 years into it anyway. But so when he was done with that, he was going to get out and he was going to go into full-time ministry. Well, this guy was dynamic. He was a people person to the nth degree. If he walked in a room, everybody would flock to him to get his attention, to say, hi, how you doing? He was just this dynamic, charismatic person that everyone wanted to be around, and people were just drawn to him. And he just had that presence about him. And if you've ever known anyone like that, you know what I'm talking about. Well, God called me into ministry when I was 16 years old, and I shared that a couple of times on the first podcast specifically. But like I said then, I only knew of 4 ways that women could be in ministry because I went to a really small church, and it was the only context for what I saw. So one, and again, context of my little church that I grew up at, women served in children's ministry. A woman was the pianist for our church every Sunday. A woman was the secretary, or a woman was a pastor's wife. Again, I'm not saying that these are the only ways that women are in ministry, not by a long shot, but this is what I thought at the time. So dating this guy led me to believe that my course was set. God had revealed that I was going to marry a pastor and serve in full-time ministry as a pastor's wife. Awesome. That's really cool. I was confused about what he wanted me to do before, so this all made a lot of sense. Well, a few months into dating, we started talking about getting married, which, by the way, is a very healthy thing to do. If you're just dating someone and not ever talking about getting married, then what are you doing? Anyway, but everything seemed to be falling into place, and it was going great until, well, it didn't. At some point, and I honestly don't remember a specific moment, he started to change. It honestly actually seemed more like an oppression thing happening, and I don't want to get mystic or too charismatic or anything, but there was something wrong. And he was experiencing like this, I don't know what else to call it except for spiritual affliction. Like his mind was in battle. He was struggling with depression, and he just could not shake whatever it was off of him. And we prayed together and we talked about it often, but nothing really ever seemed to help. He would like kind of get back up a little bit, but then he would go right back down. Well, one day I really wanted to boost his spirit, and so I decided to surprise him, and again, with hopes to cheer him up. So I drove the 2 hours or whatever it was. He wasn't stationed like right next to us. His family lived in town, so that's how we met, but then he went elsewhere. to serve. But anyway, so I drove the 2 or I think maybe even close to 3 hours. Anyway, up there to spend the day with him, and it was wonderful, and we had a great time together, and it was great. And then I drove back home, and he did cheer up, and he seemed to be really happy. Well, the next day he called and said what I had been, at least the first part, begging God to do, and that was for God to speak to him, to break him of these shackles or whatever you want to call it, that he was really struggling with. He had been in such a dry spell spiritually, but God had finally broken through. And so he called and he said, God spoke to me, and I was ecstatic. I was thrilled. Finally, after weeks and weeks that turned into months of him struggling, God finally revealed something to him. Of course, I eagerly asked him what God had said. Like, don't leave me hanging here. But unfortunately, I was not prepared at all for the answer. He said, God told me that you're not mine. Yeah. Talk about a deflating moment. I was so hyped up and so excited for what God had finally told him. And what did he tell him? That I was not his, that I didn't belong to him. So here I was. I have been cheering for this guy. I've been encouraging him. I've been praying for him, and on and on and on and on and on. And then he tells me that God says, well, that's nice, but you're not mine. I do not belong to him. And while that may, especially, like, I don't know your background or where you come from, but that may sound like a really bad breakup line. Okay. It might, but this really was real. It really was genuine. And I can attest to that because when he said it, I immediately had peace with it and was okay. It wasn't like, I mean, it did shock me, obviously. I didn't see that coming, but it wasn't like, what? There's no way. That's not what God could want. Like, as soon as he said it, I immediately felt peace and just released from that relationship. It obviously wasn't the most fun news I've ever received, but it was right. And we both knew it. And so we parted ways. And with that breakup, like any breakup, with that came the dissolution of a dream. When you are planning to spend your life with someone, or even in the early stages of dating, like, again, hopefully your purpose of dating is to find the person that you want to be with forever. You dream, what would life be like with this person? And we had been dreaming about that for a while and talking about marriage. And so, like, talk about I didn't come to a fork in the road. One road completely stopped and I had to get off and I had to start going on a new one. And I knew, like, I was never really going to see him again. And if you've ever been there, it's a tough transition to handle, even if you know that it's the right decision. So just because it's the right thing to do doesn't make it easier, or it doesn't make it pain-free in the moment. But I really did know that it was the right thing. I was 100% okay with not being with him, but I was not okay with him still struggling so much. See, he didn't have this come to God moment that radically shook him of the demons that were haunting him. And I use that somewhat metaphorically. It may be true. I don't know, but that's exactly why I can't say it. I don't know. But he didn't God did speak to him, but he told him something about me, that our relationship needed to end because I didn't belong to him. God didn't tell him that this is how you break free of whatever you're struggling with, or this is what, like, there was no radical come to Jesus moment or come back to Jesus moment where he set everything right and made him free. And, like, now that he was released from me, sounds so awful. I mean, it may have been true. Like, he was going to go off and do some great things, but that's not what happened. All that I knew and all that he shared and all that I still believe to this day to be true is that he said, you can't be with Mindi anymore. But that did not solve any of his other issues or what he was struggling with. And because of that, I knew he was still struggling, and I decided that I was going to dedicate myself to intercede for him in prayer. I didn't know who else was lifting him up in prayer. I'm sure his family was. I'm sure he had some friends who were. But I was determined to pray enough to take the place of everybody, dozens of others. I was not going to give up. My goal was set. This resolution was set in stone. Now, to be honest and completely transparent, I never expected him to ever know that I was praying for him. ever. That wasn't my perspective in this. When we broke up, we broke all contact. My goal here was not for him to get better so that we could get back together. That's truly not where I was at. God had shut that door, and I really was okay with it. But I just felt this urge to pray for him. And so I did. And I prayed for him every single day for months. And most of the time throughout the day. And sometimes they were long, elaborate prayers where I was just pouring my heart out and, with lots of details and lots of different nuances of things. But other days it was, and especially once throughout the day, it was just this refrain of don't let him go. Don't let him go. Don't let him go. Don't let him go. And that was my mantra and really the overarching theme of all of my prayers for him were, Lord, please, please, please don't let him go. Don't let him fall away. Keep him close to you. Keep him tightly in your arms. Just don't let him go. Use him like I know that he can be used for your glory. So this was just a glimpse into what my prayers were for him for months. I kept praying. I was diligent. If anything could happen because of prayer, I was going to prove that it could happen because I had made this my mission was to pray him into being in right standing with God again, to pray him into being okay and to coming up for air. And I was fully expecting at any point and every point during this whole months-long period to log into social media one day and see that he had rededicated himself to God, that he was doing great, that he had accepted some pastorship somewhere. So all of this time, I kept expecting God to show me that, hey, my prayers were answered. He's doing great. He's off on a wonderful path. And so he could release me from that. Well, that's not what happened. What actually happened couldn't have shocked me more than being hit by a Mack truck because, continuing the story. That year, I went home for Christmas break and I lived really far away from where I went to school. So my family was in Southern California and had been my whole life, but I was going to school at Liberty in Virginia. So coming home was kind of a big deal because, flying across the country and whatnot. Then I was home, and one quiet afternoon, I did log into social media again, expecting like my prayers are going to be answered, and he was like going to be off succeeding and to be like this wonderful pastor, or whatever it was. However, the first thing that popped up, and I do mean the first thing, was that he had gotten married, but not to a good, sweet Christian young lady who had a heart for the Lord and wanted also to be a pastor's wife. He had started dating someone who was at the time engaged to someone else. He broke them up and then he married her within a 6-week time frame. Okay, so he started dating someone when she was engaged to somebody else, broke off that engagement, got engaged to her himself, and then married her within 6 weeks. I didn't know this girl personally, but I knew of her and I knew people who knew her. But I did know enough about her to know that she was not the most concerned about God or what he wanted. She was not living for the Lord. And I have no idea if she was a Christian or not. I'm not the Holy Spirit. I have no idea. But there was no indication anywhere that she cared about God, much less was trying to live for him. So the decision to marry this girl was a nail in the coffin of this guy rejecting God. He had dug his own grave and now was lying down in it. And it broke me. I remember that afternoon, and I always will, with stunning clarity. I sat there staring at the screen for what seemed like forever. I was just in shock. Like I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and it took more than a few minutes for it to kind of sink in what had happened. It was a Sunday afternoon. I knew my parents were at choir at church and my sister was somewhere else in the house. I don't really know what she was doing. She was there, not like really close to me. And tears were just running down my face. And I just, after it kind of hit me what happened, I had to get out of there. So I turned the computer off, I grabbed my keys, and I told my sister I was leaving, but I'd be back soon. And then I just started driving. By the way, so dumb. Please don't do that. You should not drive when you're upset. It's just a recipe for disaster. Don't ever do that. Don't put yourself in that position, and don't put your loved ones in the position to worry about you. She didn't know I was upset. She didn't know what happened. But even then, don't do it. Don't drive while you're upset. Anyway, I had no idea where I was going or what I wanted to do. Again, I was just kind of stunned. I was very upset, but I was just kind of besides myself. I didn't know where I was going. And like, where do you think people end up when they're in that situation, right? Are you envisioning all the things you think, oh, maybe she ends up at a bar? I think I was 21 at this point. I don't know, but never drank before. But anyway, so I'm like, but these are the kinds of things that you think, oh, it's this like big crucial moment in a movie or in a novel, and something bad happens and you end up going to a bar, or you end up going to, a mountaintop somewhere and just hashing out all of these things with God this way. So you're just expecting this like super climatic, exclamation point moment. But that is not what happened with me. I drove and I ended up, of all places, drum roll please, at Staples. Yes. The office supply store. I don't know why. I still to this day have no idea why. So I pull into the parking lot and makeup is just smudged in all over my face because I'm still crying. And I go into Staples and I don't even want to know what people thought about me. And I buy what? A journal and some pens. Like, I don't know who does this. I don't know why I did it. Like, we had a million journals and pens at home. I don't know why I felt the need to go to Staples and buy a new one, but I did. That's what happened. And nothing I was doing made sense in that moment. And I don't think it can. So I'm not going to try to figure it out. But I bought the notebook and I bought pens and I headed back home. And the next part of the story gets slightly redeemed because it was kind of a climatic moment. We lived at the time on top of this really, really, really big hill. I don't know if I'd call it quite a mountain. I actually have no idea at what point a hill becomes a mountain, but regardless, it was pretty high up there. And from my parents' balcony, my parents' bedroom faced the back of the house, and they had a gorgeous balcony. And from there, we could see a lot. It was beautiful. On a clear day, you could see all the way down to San Diego and then all the way up to LA. And oh my goodness, it was the best place to watch fireworks for 4th of July because you could just see just hundreds of fireworks shows down in the valley. And it was gorgeous. So that's where I went to hash things out with God. So there's the exclamation point moment. Staples kind of threw a wrench in there, but it gets redeemed a little bit. So I'm sitting up here, I'm super high and I'm looking out over everything. And it was a gorgeous evening and it was nearing sunset. So you think of like all of the dramatic elements, like they were there. It was peaceful and gorgeous weather and like, well, not that there's ever really not gorgeous weather in California, but you get the point. So everything was like going according to plan, except the serene surroundings did not match or mimic the state of my heart. I was heartbroken. I was absolutely crushed like I'd never been before. And my biggest question, which hopefully this one actually makes sense, was why? Why did God let this happen? He loved this guy more than I ever did. Why did he let him go? He was powerful enough to save him. All he had to do was flip the switch of his heart and that's it. And he was powerful and he was capable enough of doing that. So why didn't he do it? I could not make sense of it. And I journaled. I don't know how long I journaled, but it was dark by the time I ended. And I had cried all of my tears. I didn't have any left. And I walked away from that dying a bit inside. I don't really know how else to say it. My faith felt like it hit a brick wall at 100 miles an hour. And I was just crushed. And again, I did let God know it. I took advantage of this time. I lashed out to him. My journaling was not like, oh, I guess you didn't think it was a good idea. No, I was mad and I was hurling accusations at him. And I mean, like I was not in a good place. And when he didn't miraculously send an answer via like an angel or opening the sky up or some kind of crazy vision, at the end of this, I grew cold. I was still his. Okay. I was a believer. I believed in him. I knew he had a purpose for me, and I was still going to obediently comply with his purposes. However, I didn't really trust that he loved me. I didn't really totally believe that he cared. I knew and believed he was sovereign, that he was king of the world, that he was ruler over all, that nothing could thwart his plans. And I did believe that he loved me. I mean, hello, he saved me. Like that's a pretty big act of love. But I stopped kind of believing that he cared about the little things, that he cared enough about the smallest parts of my heart and my desires. And that became, unfortunately, my new reality of faith. I was frozen. And then I started constructing a wall of stoicism around my heart. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to process this with. I didn't really have anyone to process this with. And so I was just frozen. I don't know how else to say it. So the next few days were a blur. But I was very much just going through the motions. It was kind of like a cloud had descended on me. Like think Eeyore with, the little rain cloud following him around, and like it's only raining on Eeyore and nobody else, even though it's sunny for everybody else. Anyway, that's kind of how I felt though. Except it was a very heavy cloud and it was not going away. But I had tried to process it through prayer. At least that's what I thought when I was journaling, but I did not want to talk about it to other people. I wasn't ready to talk about it. There were still lots of things going through my mind, but it turns out when tragedy happens, and I know if you've experienced any kind of tragedy or trauma in your life, the world does not stop. You stop. And it seems like your heart has stopped, but the world keeps going on. And so I pretended like nothing had happened with my family. I didn't really talk to them about it, and the world kept on spinning and didn't really care that I was not really up for the ride at the moment. So I ended up going back to school that January to begin another semester, and on a whim, I call it a whim. I don't believe in whims, but there really wasn't a lot of thought that went into it. I decided that I was actually going to do a New Year's resolution, and maybe this is part of why I don't like them so much because of what ended up happening here. But anyway, I was the most stereotypical person on planet Earth, and I decided that my New Year's resolution was to lose a little bit of weight and get in better shape. So yeah, that's literally as stereotypical as it gets, but that's where I was. But what I didn't realize at the time was that I was turning my gaze inward instead of upward to God. I couldn't control him, so I was going to take control of what I could, which was my body. I alone controlled what I ate and what I did with my body, and believe you me, I was determined to take control of it. But what I didn't expect was this casual, not well thought out resolution to spark a full-blown eating disorder. It started small. I started counting calories and working out at our campus gym. I bought a lot of fitness magazines. Do people still get magazines now? I don't know. But I bought a lot of them and I read them religiously, and I put all of the advice into action. And when you do that, you get results. And a couple of weeks later, I lost several pounds. And my initial goal was to lose 7 pounds, which sounds really random, but it would have gotten me to a specific weight that I thought would, fulfill all my dreams. But turns out, shockingly, I didn't really like how I looked when I hit that goal. And I didn't feel different or anything. So I said, okay, well, I'll just lose 5 more. Well, of course, that became 5 more and 5 more. And so by the time spring break came around, which was just a couple of months later, I had lost 22 pounds. And I remember being on the phone with my dad before I came home, and I told him that I'd lost some weight, and he said, how much? And I told him, and he said, from where? And that of course broke me because I thought that I was huge before, which was not true. But these are the lies that you believe when you are dealing with an eating disorder. And so that was all swirling around in my head. But I also remember that on the plane ride home, for spring break, someone asked me if I was a model. Someone sitting next to me, I was reading a fitness magazine, and he's like, "Are you a model?" And I'm sure that he only asked me that because I was young and grossly underweight. But that made me feel really good. Like, hey, I finally took control of something. I am getting results to the point where other people are noticing me. And obviously they think I'm beautiful, because that no one would ask you if you're a model if they didn't think that you were beautiful. So I was actually feeling pretty good, even though my body was incredibly weak, and I actually was feeling pretty awful physically at the time. And at that time I had crossed a line. I was very much underweight. But the thing about eating disorders is that they are sneaky little beasts. I still felt fat. In my mind, I had too much jiggly in my stomach, and too much jiggly in my arms, and too much jiggly here, and too much jiggly there. And so I kept going. And by summer break, I had lost so much weight that I stopped weighing myself. And because I was in the 80s, not 180s, obviously, in the 80s range, I think the last time I looked at a scale I was at 85 or maybe even 84 pounds. And so I stopped weighing myself because I knew that wasn't good, but I also knew that I wasn't going to change. And so I was like, well, I'll just deny reality. And if I don't know for a fact that I'm not still losing weight, then I must be okay. And it was then that my dad, obviously he had seen at a distance what was happening. And then I came home and he saw up close what was happening. And he, unbeknownst to me, had been doing some research, and he had a confrontation with me, and it was gentle. But he gently told me that I was anorexic and that we needed to do something about it. And my first thought, to be totally honest, was, I am not anorexic. I eat. And I always thought, for some reason, way back, I guess, in health class in high school, that anorexia was just not eating at all. But that's actually not true. Anorexia is not eating enough. And I was most certainly not eating enough. I only ate 600 calories a day for months, and I would work out for an hour a day, 6 days a week. So, and to give you perspective on this, okay, obviously 600 calories is like one meal. Okay, so I was eating only that much a whole day. And when I went to the gym, and I tell you I worked out for an hour on all the machines, maybe not all, but most of the machines that I was on, it counts how much calories you're burning, right? I know it's not a perfect science, but I wouldn't leave the gym until I had burned off 600 calories. So you're doing the math. I was only taking in 600 calories, and then I was working out 600 calories. So my balance for the day would be 0. And shockingly, that's how I was losing a lot of weight. But once the thought is planted, so my dad had told me that I was anorexic, and I was shocked. I was like, no, I'm not. That doesn't make any sense. But once that thought is planted, it's really hard to shake. And so I started doing some research, and it didn't take me long to realize that I was, in fact, anorexic. There are a lot of symptoms of anorexia, and going down the lists on every website that I could find, I was checking almost, if not all of them, off. Insomnia, check. A complete stop in my menstrual cycles for extreme cases of anorexia, check. Fear of getting fat, that's a big fat check. Excessive physical activity, check. Fixation with food preparation, but then not actually eating very much, check. Oh, I love to cook. I would cook all day long. I would go to grocery stores and spend hours there. And then there's something weirdly strange about if you are around a lot of food and you smell food, it kind of takes hunger away when you get to a certain point. And so I would cook and I would be around food a lot, but I wouldn't actually eat it or much of it. Unusual eating behaviors, check. Denial of hunger, check. And I kept reading through these symptoms, and then I realized that I was looking in a mirror because I was anorexic, and not just anorexic. I was like the textbook case of anorexia. So that was a hard pill to swallow. But again, knowing something doesn't do anything. And we've talked about this before. in different episodes. You have to know it. Okay. Knowledge comes first. It always comes first. Then you have to believe it, and then you have to do something about it, right? So when it comes to faith, you have to know about God. You have to know the gospel. Then you have to choose to believe it and believe him. And then you have to choose to act in obedience to him. Well, it's the same process, although vastly different application with things like getting confronted that you have an eating disorder. So now I had the knowledge. I was anorexic. I could not deny that. My dad had told me, and I researched it for myself, and that is what I was. And I did believe it. I mean, you can't really argue with that amount of facts. I guess some people do today, but I wasn't doing that. Like, I was, and I believed it. But what was I supposed to do about it now that I knew that I was struggling with it? And this was particularly difficult because I didn't want to change. I was scared of changing. And there's no easy answer for getting help with any kind of eating disorder. And I'm not going to talk about other things because that I don't have no experience with. But with this, I mean, and with other things, I would imagine you can't just flip a switch and then not be anorexic, right? Like, that's not how it works. You can't just, and my dad, who's so sweet, but he's just like, eat a cheeseburger. And I'm like, I can't eat a cheeseburger. That's not how it works. Like, I would freak out. Like, it's just, you can't do that. Or I guess you physically could. But honestly, at that point, that probably would have made me really, really sick. And through my healing journey, actually stuff like that happened. I remember once, like, I was trying to prove to myself that I could eat like junk food, and I ate a tiny little bag of Skittles, like Halloween tiny candy sized Skittles. And I felt sick for a day because my body hadn't eaten anything like that in a really long time. But anyway, the point was, so you can't just snap out of it. But the other particularly really hard thing about anorexia or eating disorders in general is that you can't kick them like you do other addictions. And please hear me say this, anorexia and eating disorders are absolutely an addiction. They may be manifested or addictions to different things, but it's an addiction. But unlike other addictions like drugs or alcohol, you can't just quit eating. That's actually what an anorexic would want to do, is just quit eating. But you can't do that. Food is a daily part of life. So you can't just quit eating. You can't just quit cold turkey, nor can you avoid it. If you're an alcoholic, okay, well, you can avoid the liquor section, or you can avoid going to the store. You can take a different route if you're going to be tempted on your way to work or back from work to avoid. You don't put yourself in the situation where you could fall. Well, that you can't do that with food. You can't do that with anorexia because you have to eat. You have to confront this, not just once a day, but all day long, multiple times a day. We eat 3 meals usually, and we snack in between. So this was something that you had to deal with head on. You could not solve it by avoiding it. And so I'd like to say that was like this big turning moment for me. Like, I knew that I was sick, and so I needed to get better, and that, started me on this healing journey. But it didn't. I will say I didn't grow worse. I didn't continue to lose weight. I don't think so. Again, I wasn't weighing myself, but I kind of went into maintenance mode because I knew obviously that there was an issue now. However, I was not getting better. I was not gaining weight. That freaked me out. I had spent months and just out every day, every second of every day trying to lose weight, flipping the switch to not only can I have to stop losing weight, but now I have to start actively gaining weight. That's like telling someone who's terrified of water that they have to jump in the pool in order to not be afraid of water. Like, it went against every fiber of my being and every ounce of emotional energy or capacity to understand. Like, I couldn't do it. I could not grasp that I needed to gain weight. I could be okay with like maintaining, but to know that I had to actually go in reverse and start gaining weight was just repulsive to me. I didn't want to do it. I didn't know how to do it, especially in a healthy way. But I was praying about it though at this point. So, like with a lot of eating disorders or addictions, you leave God out of it, obviously, because you know what you're doing, even subconsciously, you know what you're doing isn't right. And I had been doing that, but now I was praying about it and I was like, okay, I know that this isn't good. I don't really know what to do. But I realized through those prayers that what this all was about, because again, anorexia, like so many other issues, they're symptoms. They're not the underlying real cause of anything. And I realized that my issue was about control. And more specifically, my issue was a huge misunderstanding of prayer and my complete inability to deal with a plan that I thought was righteous, but that God did not see to fruition. And again, it started with this guy who I thought that God had just completely let go and said, well, forget you, Mindi. You have no idea what you're talking about. I am going to let him go. And coming to realize this, that my anorexia was linked to all of this, was a big deal, and it was a big process. Because again, I had it figured out in regards to this guy. God was going to rescue him, and he was going to launch him into a ministry that was going to rock the world for him. And I was going to be reading his books one day, and I was going to be listening to his sermons, knowing, even if he never knew, I would know that I played a role, even if it was small, in his quote unquote making it. I did it. I had this planned out. I saw it in my mind. This is what was going to happen. And when he did succeed, I knew that it was all going to be worth it. The goal had been set. The plan was set in motion. All God had to do was flip that switch of his heart. That's all he had to do. Isaiah 64:6 says, quote, "For all of us have become like one who is unclean, and all our righteous deeds are like a filthy garment, and all of us wither like a leaf, and our iniquities like the wind take us away." Unquote. If my whole mentality pre and during my anorexia isn't the very definition of self-righteousness that is described in this verse, I don't know what is. Now, were my deeds quote unquote good? Sure. I mean, I was praying for someone to be great for God. I was praying for God to save him and to not let him fall into sin. I was praying the right thing would happen. How could that possibly be bad? But this is where the Isaiah verse comes in. All our righteous deeds are like what? A filthy garment. My quote unquote righteous prayers were like a filthy garment. And in this verse, by the way, I don't want to get too gross, but filthy garment is actually a pretty mild term for what it's referring to. It's referring to used women's disposable things that come around about once a month. Okay, this is nasty. This isn't like a garment that just like randomly fell on the ground and got a little bit dirt on it and you're going to like just wipe it off. No, this is hardcore gross. Okay, this is the epitome of filthy. So this kind of filth, bad, filthy garment, this is what my righteous, again, self-righteous prayers were like. And why were they like this? Because they were motivated by my selfishness. While I didn't realize it at the time, I was trying to manipulate God into doing what I wanted instead of submitting to what He wanted and then trusting Him with the results. And I believed that because I was praying for something good, I couldn't fail. And I believed that if I prayed hard enough, that He would answer me with a big fat yes and then pat me on the back in the process of doing so. I thought my goal was a sure thing because my resolution was surely God's resolution. I thought that I was somehow capable of making God get with my program and make it all work out the way I wanted it to. Now, are you hearing how many times I'm saying I in this little narrative? It was ultimately and absolutely all about me. My righteous deeds were certainly like a filthy, gross, used garment, and it was rotting me as I wore it. And instead of God's answer no. He did answer no. But instead of that snapping me out of my self-centered funk, I opted instead to go deeper into my self-centered funk and nearly kill myself in the process because I became anorexic and so incredibly sick. Even if that wasn't my original intent, nobody starts out being anorexic thinking like, oh, it's because of this. And, you're not philosophically aware of all the reasons why you're doing so, at least normally. I certainly wasn't. But that's what happened. Instead of going up to God and turning my gaze to him, I turned it inward, which is never a good idea, by the way. Oh, and also, by the way, I did nearly kill myself. Not suicide or anything, but I ended up getting really, really sick to the point that I was given 6 weeks to live if I hadn't gotten pretty severe medical intervention. And that brief story is I had finished my undergrad studies in December, so most people finish in May, but I didn't. I finished early, and I planned to start my master's in January, and I had a full ride scholarship waiting for me, and everything, again, was going to all the plans. Well, there were 2 weeks during winter break, and God called me to go on a missions trip during those 2 weeks to Cambodia. And and I'll always be honest with you, I did not want to go. Okay. This was not me being some holier than thou person wanting to go save people in Cambodia. I didn't. And that sounds awful. And it was awful, but I did not want to go. But God made it so abundantly clear that I needed to go. And I ended up raising without even trying. Like, I barely told anybody that I was going. And you're supposed to do these like fundraising campaigns because it's expensive. It was like $3,500. I raised double of what I needed, barely opening my mouth. So, and I was able to pay for someone else to go who actually really did want to go. So anyway, it was not a good situation, but I went anyway, somewhat kicking and screaming. And while I was there, I contracted some kind of something. I actually never figured out what it was. Some kind of, I actually have no idea. I'm not even going to pretend like I know, but I had to go to the hospital because I was so sick. And we were in Phnom Penh, which is a big city, and it also happens to be one of the top 5 dirtiest cities in the world. They have this like, it's a river technically, flowing through the city. It's black, and I'm not exaggerating. It's like black sludge to where people have fallen in it and died because it's so toxic. Okay, so this is like running through the middle of the city. It's gross. But I was taken to a small American ward in the hospital and was given who knows what. They poked, prodded, injected me with all kinds of things to get me back on my feet. Interestingly, though, when I was there, I'm on this like tiny little bed in this dirty room. And even I, who wasn't even really with it, but I was with it enough to realize like this was not sanitary. I started chatting with the doctor, and the doctor was an Iranian. So he had grown up in Iran. He was a Muslim, and he had just moved to Cambodia to practice medicine on a, again, whim because he wanted something different. I'd say he got his wish. It is very different. Well, actually, I can't say that like experientially because I've never been to Iran, but I would imagine, and he confirmed that it was very different. Anywho, I was able to share the gospel with him. I laid out the plan of salvation. I answered questions that he had, and I thought for sure, like I was having an out-of-body experience a bit, and I thought 100% for sure that this was why I had to come to Cambodia, because God knew I was going to get sick. He knew he wanted me to share the gospel with this guy. And it's so God, isn't it, to bring an Iranian doctor to Cambodia and then me, temporary missionary trip, girl getting sick. Like, that's so God. Only God can write stories like that. So I was like, for sure, this is for sure the end. Like, this is why God wanted me here. But also, I'm going to die. And I was honestly, and this sounds awful, but I was okay with it. Like, I was so tired. Again, I'd been anorexic for a really, really, really long time. And your body starts shutting down. And it wasn't like to the point where my organs stopped functioning yet, but like things were happening in my body that were not good. And I knew that. And I was so tired. Again, I was anorexic. I was struggling with insomnia. I couldn't sleep. I hadn't had a good night's sleep since I became anorexic, because turns out you can't really sleep well if you are starving. Anyway, so I thought for sure that was what he wanted me to share the gospel, and that I was going to die. And that was my last act of ministry, was sharing the gospel because I didn't have the energy or desire or motivation to go on, if I'm being honest. Well, the doctor didn't accept Christ on the spot, but when I left, I did notice him on Amazon. Isn't that so funny? Buying a Bible and a particular apologetics book that I told him about that compared Muslim faith to Christianity. And long story short, I ended up making it back home. But I was far from out of the woods. I needed to go home. So I made it home to Virginia, but I needed to go home to be like with my parents. I couldn't take care of myself. And so I postponed school. I dropped out for that semester. And my parents by this point had moved to North Carolina. My sister went to UNC Chapel Hill. And so that's what finally my dad got to get out of California. So they moved to North Carolina. And so I went home to live with them. And I spent a solid 4 straight months going from my bed to the couch and then back to bed again. I didn't do anything. And I didn't ever get diagnosed with anything super specific. I did get diagnosed with mono, which was really weird because believe you me, I was not dating anybody at this time. So that was weird, but I was just a mess. And they tried to prescribe me, and my doctor was really sweet, but tried to prescribe me some kind of I don't know, something to help me sleep. And I took half of one pill and it made me feel like a Looney Tune. So I didn't take that anymore. But I knew my issue at this point was spiritual. Yes, it had physical symptoms, but it was mainly a spiritual issue. And so I was just exhausted all the time. And the only time I left the house during the first few months was to go to church. But even then, I couldn't even stand up during worship. So I literally would go to church. I would sit down and stay seated the entire time and then leave and go home again and go right back to the couch. So this was my life. And at the time, my parents were going to a little storefront church that was new. There was about 70 people attending it. And pretty early on, I did notice that there was a cute guy on stage playing the guitar during worship. So he's on the praise team. And also, to be completely transparent, he was noticeable because there were approximately, 5 people between the ages of 18 and 40 going to the church. So we each stood out rather blindingly. But again, I noticed him and I thought, and I was right, but he noticed me, but I wasn't exactly in great shape, nor did I ever want to stick around to socialize afterwards. So we were going here, and a few months in, the pastor asked my dad to preach one Sunday because he was going out of town, or I don't remember the details, but afterwards people started coming up and introducing themselves to our family and to me, and including one of them was a guy named Matt, who was very sweet, but no sooner did Matt shake my hand than the cute guitar player named Sean nudged his way in and introduced himself to me. Finally, and long story short, again, we got connected and we started dating. But again, I was not in good shape. I was sick. It was really, really, really bad. 1 week, a couple of months into dating, Sean had planned this day where we were going to go up to Raleigh, which was nearby, and just have a date and drive over everywhere and explore a bunch of different places because I'd never really explored there before. And that was going to be on a Friday. Well, the Thursday night, I started feeling sick, not just like my normal weak self, but started feeling really not well. And so I texted him and I canceled, and I felt awful about it, but I knew that there was no way that I was going to be able to hang for an entire day out and about the town. Just was not in any position to do that. So he showed up the next morning with a big bag of Panera, all kinds of soups and breads and a bunch of movies. I cried. 1, because I was so thankful, but 2, because I felt, again, just so guilty that we had to cancel our plans and he had taken the whole day off and I just ruined everything. And so we settled into the couch and we're watching a movie. And again, I apologized for ruining the day. And I will always remember this part of the story clear as day. He looked over to me and he said, "Mindi, I could care less about what we're doing. I just want to be with you." And while it doesn't sound all that profound on the surface, it was almost as if in that moment, God pulled back the veil of heaven itself and spoke to me directly through Sean. I can't explain it other than that, but God was saying those words to me personally, and suddenly everything started to make sense and a huge shift had taken place in my heart. God didn't care about what I did for him, at least primarily. He wanted to be with me. He didn't care about how much I prayed for other people, or how many ministries I started, or how many people I witnessed to, or how many degrees I got, or how many goals I accomplished for him and in his name. None of that mattered if he didn't have me, if he didn't have my heart. And in that moment, I realized that he wanted me, and he wanted to be with me. And suddenly everything changed. And that was the beginning, the true beginning of my healing journey, spiritually and physically. God kept using Sean over and over in this process of healing. And it was weird because he wasn't like my counselor, we didn't really talk about it, but God absolutely used him. Sean obviously knew I was struggling with anorexia. I mean, I told him that much, but he never pushed about it. He never looked at me weird if I said I wasn't hungry when it was obvious that I probably was. He never criticized my food choices at restaurants. He never belittled me. He was patient. And it was through our relationship that God revealed his unwavering love and patience with me. I was being healed, and I've always known in the moment and after the fact that Sean and our marriage represents God, and he was always an extension of his grace, mercy, forgiveness, healing, and love. And I'm so thankful. God used a love story before, a broken love story, to reveal a significant and severe impediment in my relationship with him. Then he used a new love story to show me what that impediment was, what was blocking the river of my heart and my life and my relationship with him, and then help me remove it so I could thrive and have an actual real relationship with him like never before. He used my love story with Sean to reveal his love story to me. He used Sean to reveal himself and to bring healing that I never would have had. It would have been impossible, because with God all things are possible, but I don't know how else he would have done it, because I tried to get better on my own for months and months and months, and it wasn't happening. While my goal with the first guy was never realized, God's heart and love for me was realized through Sean years later, and I am so thankful for it. And I want to read a quote from C.S. Lewis in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, because it describes this process of healing so perfectly. Then the lion said, "But I don't know if it spoke. You will have to let me undress you." And I was afraid of his claws, I can tell you, but I'm pretty nearly desperate now. So I just lay flat down on my back to let him do it. The very first tear he made was so deep, I thought it had gone right into my heart. And when he began pulling the skin off, it hurt worse than anything I've ever felt. The only thing that made me able to bear it was just the pleasure of feeling that stuff peel off. If you've ever picked the scab off of a sore place, it hurts like billy-o, but it is such fun to see it coming away. "I know exactly what you mean," said Edmund. Well, he peeled the beastly stuff right off, just as I thought I'd done it myself, and other 3 times, only they hadn't hurt. And there it was lying on the grass, only ever so much thicker and darker and more knobbly looking than the others had been. And there was I, smooth and soft as a peeled switch and smaller than I had been. Then he caught hold of me. I didn't like that much, for I was very tender underneath now that I had no skin on, and threw me into the water. It smarted like anything, but only for a moment. After that, it became perfectly delicious, and as soon as I started swimming and splashing, I found that all the pain that had gone from my arm, and then I saw why I had turned into a boy again. God had let me turn into myself again, but not the same that I had been before. I was better. I was so much better. He had made me new. And I thought, he really did make me new. He had rescued me from myself. And for the longest time, I thought that that was the end of the story. Actually, when I say the longest time, it was about 15 years. I had and like put it out of my mind, but I just, life goes on and things happen, and my life obviously took a very different trajectory until a couple of months ago. I was actually thinking through this story and was praying through about how to share it with you on this podcast. One morning as I was getting ready for the day, and later on I was making coffee, and I checked Facebook because I had a notification and someone had liked one of my posts on my author page. Well, that someone was him. It was the guy from the first story. And it was the guy who had fallen off the deep end so very long ago. And again, I could not have been more shocked. First, because I had just been thinking about him in this story. It was all coming back because of what I'd gone through and how God, rescued me and saved me and lifted me up. But secondly, because I blocked him from my social media a long time ago. Like a few months after he had kind of like fallen off the deep end, he did try reaching out to me via social media, and I just completely blocked him, believing that I needed to sever all ties. And I don't regret that for a second. I think that was the right move. But apparently he had found my author page at some point and just happened to like a post, my recent post, which by the way is the only one he's ever liked, and it's the before, and it's the only one he's ever liked since. And it just happened to come just a couple of hours as I was still thinking about it right when I was thinking about the story and sharing it with you guys. So naturally, I was shocked, but then naturally I was curious. And so I clicked on his profile and scrolled through it briefly. Again, it wasn't more than 2 or 3 minutes. And one of the first posts I saw on his profile was a short testimony of how God had saved him from a severe battle with addiction. And it was obvious he was at a church in a church context, and it was obvious that he was now serving in a church and serving in an addictions ministry. Guys, when I realized this, I just I broke again, because God did answer my prayers. All those years ago, for all those months. He didn't let him go. Now, obviously, he let him wander for a while, and it did get bad. I don't know the details. I don't care to. I don't need to. But God did save him. He pulled him up, and now maybe he's using him in a greater capacity than he ever would have before. Maybe he's using him now to reach people that he couldn't have reached before had God answered my prayers with a yes immediately 15 years ago. And I just want you to know. So he let me see the end of that story. He let me see that he did say yes. It was just in his way and in his timing. And we don't always get to see that, right? Okay, so we don't always get to see that part of the story. We don't always get to see the veil of heaven peeled back when God lets us behold him and what he has been doing. But friends, you need to know this, okay? God is working. He knows what's best. He is capable and powerful to make it happen. And he is always trustworthy. And he does love us. And he loved us enough to send Jesus, yes, but he loves you, and he loves you personally, and he loves you, and he wants to be with you. He wants a relationship with us, and which he made possible through Jesus. He doesn't want a bunch of soldiers carrying out marching orders. He doesn't want a bunch of employees setting goals and then carrying them out with unwavering precision of robots. Okay, he wants us. He wants his children to love and enjoy him forever. He wants to be with us, and he wants us to be with him. And we don't always get to see how he's working everything out, but we can absolutely 100% without a doubt trust that he is working everything out. And that is one reason why setting goals and resolutions can be dangerous. It is good to plan for the future, but not if doing so leaves him out or seeks to bend him to our will. We exist to know and love him, and everything we do should reflect that pulse in our hearts and in our lives. And if he says no or not yet to our prayers, we need to trust that it's because it's what's best, that he is being glorified in and through that no or not yet, and that through that answer, we will be strengthened and sanctified in the process. I obviously did not get with the program earlier on, and even though I caused so much more unnecessary pain than should have happened in my own heart and life, he was still faithful. When I became anorexic, he should have, if I got what I deserved, he should have just left me there. He should have been like, are you serious? You are so dumb. Why are you doing it? He should have left me in the pit that I dug for myself, but he didn't. He sent Sean, and because he knew that Sean's personality and just who he is would draw me, yes, close to Sean, but more importantly, closer to him. And that's why he sent me. He sent Sean to help pull me out, because he cared enough to do it. Guys, he cares enough. He cared not enough. He cared more than you could possibly imagine. He cares for you, and he is working to pull you up and to pull you closer to him, even if he doesn't feel like it, even if you can't see it, even if you feel like no one could save you and no one should save you because of the pit that you've dug for yourself, guys. He does love you, and he wants to be with you, and he wants to pull you out. Please let him do that. Please let him do that. Please lean into him. Don't do what I did at first and retreat into yourself. Okay. I retreated into myself and I wanted to just take control. Please don't do that. Please reach up and let him pull you out. And it may take a while. For me, it took a long time. And to this day, I don't weigh myself. We have a scale in the house, but I am not allowed to, but I don't want to use it either. So, there are still things that I still wrestle with, because of that whole time in my life. But the biggest thing that I walked away with is that he does love me, and he is working everything out for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. I know that verse in Romans is grossly misused and used just in the worst of times and the worst of situations, but it is true. He is working, and sometimes we don't get to see it, but sometimes, like me, years later, he shows you. And there is nothing more beautiful than seeing that, and to be reminded that he does see you, he does love you. And when he gives you that kind of gift, he didn't have to do that. Like, he had given me a gift through Sean, and he had worked way more than I ever deserved or expected before that. But the fact that he just decided to give me that cherry on top, guys, there are no words. For a woman who talks a lot, there are no words. So, when plans don't go your way this year, because let's be honest, they very, very rarely go exactly as planned. Trust him. Choose to lean into him, not away from him like I did. Choose to follow and to give him your heart and trust him with the results, knowing that he will work everything out for his glory and for our ultimate good, even if it doesn't seem very good in the meantime. I am a living testimony of his grace, goodness, mercy, and love. And whether you know it or not, you are too. So if you're going to make a resolution this year, make one for him. Make it to do whatever you can to grow closer to him and to give your heart to him and to love him more. Pray for him to open the eyes of your heart so you can see him more clearly and be wrecked afresh with his grace over and over and over again. He is worth it, friends. And he really is making all things new. We just need to get out of the way and let him. So thank you for listening to my mess today. Thank you for listening to this story. And I pray that this part of my story will let you see the author behind it, and that listening to it has sparked a new level of adoration for him in your heart and in your life. May you ever increase in your knowledge and understanding of your Savior. May you ever love him abundantly more each and every day and be inspired to live out your faith boldly in this world. He is working everything out trust Him to do so in your life, and trust Him to use you as He writes His story in others' lives as well.